If you liked Red Rising by Pierce Brown or James Islington's Will of the Many, then I have a book recommendation for you. G'day BookTube, you're here with Nick the Renaissance Bookman, and today I want to talk to you about Ironbound by Andrew Givler. This is a progression fantasy, more on that later. My first progression fantasy, and if you like those two books, I think you're really going to like this one. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's got a very similar feel, a very similar vibe. It's indie published, so maybe it's not as polished as Red Rising in particular, but this was a whole bunch of fun. I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible to begin with, and then I'll make a clear delineation where I want to talk about some of the stuff that happens, and so I'll be talking about the spoilers. So the story Ironbound, it follows our lead protagonist, Castor, this young boy as he transitions into a man. We pick up the story in the final days of his time at the collegium, the college, the academy type setting. It's not a school-based environment. That's not what the book is, but that's where we pick up our story. As only the best of the best in each of the little regions, they vie for the right to be awarded a core heart, C-O-R, core heart. Core is a material that literally rains from the sky like manna from heaven. And once you get this material, you purify it, whatever they do, and you can basically ingest this into your body, slap it onto your chest, and this material becomes part of who you are. And it allows you to imbue or attune yourself, form a symbiotic relationship with an element or a material. Think fire, smoke even, rain, heat, iron, grass, these different materials. Whatever you can think of, you can do that. The way that you imbue or attune yourself to a material, it becomes part of you and you can manipulate it in ways that you could not previously. And so during the award ceremony, essentially something happens. Chaos rains down. And through this process, Castor actually ends up becoming imbued with iron. I'm not giving anything away. It alludes to as much on the back cover. And if you couldn't figure that out, it's kind of the title of the whole story. So what happens from here is that we follow Castor as he deals with the consequences of being attuned to a material that he did not want to be attuned to as he seeks his revenge. Yes, this is ultimately a revenge story. This is where it has a lot of those similarities with Red Rising and with Will of the Many, where both of our protagonists are on this long burn revenge story. And that's exactly what's going on with Castor. And so this book is first person, it's present tense, it's action orientated, plot focused, and it's a progression fantasy. That's a whole bunch of words, but don't worry, we're going to explore all of those in time. It's a Roman-inspired world, so think of senators. There are multiple gods. We have plebeians, we have praetorians, legionnaires, we have proctors, domina and dominus are thrown out, primus, sectus, all of these sorts of things. So if you liked the language that you saw throughout Red Rising, this will feel like home to you as well. It's not complete carbon copies, but we're using the same source material, right? If you can remember the Institute in Red Rising where Olympus is where all the proctors and everyone sat watching the games essentially take place. Yeah, well, we've got Mount Olympus as well. Olympus Mons sitting there as this floating island, and it's right there, right there in this world. And so this is where the gods used to live. But we now live in a world where the gods killed. They've been defeated. All of the gods have been overthrown by these previous Iron Lords. There were these 6 epic fighters and they were able to hunt down and kill all of the gods. And so that's where they used to live, like at Olympus Mons. And it's constantly referenced as this foreboding thing that sort of floats past the sky all the time. Every time Castor looks to the sky, Mons Olympus is right there, and it's got some sort of reference to it as well. Everyone's always referencing or praying to the dead gods. They're very much a part of society. In the same way in John Gwyn's Bloodsworn saga, they always talk about the deceased gods. We have that same sort of relationship and how they're involved in the language as well. We don't get a lot to learn about in terms of the physical geography of the world. Yes, we've got this floating island there, and Castor himself comes from an agricultural region where there's obviously a lot of farming that takes place. We hear about cities occasionally. There is the north, which is this frigid Arctic type environment, and we get this, that they reference the south as well at some point in time being a desert. But that's about it. We don't get a lot of this sort of world building from that perspective. But one thing that you do get in terms of the world building is that the magic system is built into the world building, much in the same way that this takes place in James Islington's Will of the Many. The magic system complements the world building, where depending on what material you are attuned to, what you have a symbiotic relationship to is probably going to be your profession. The most obvious of these is in the title Ironbound. I've said before that only those that are warriors, those that are in the legions, they are all ironbound, because we're in an era where we're fighting with iron swords. We're fighting with iron shields in shield walls. We're like a phalanx style shield wall. We're fighting with iron armor. So it makes sense that those that are attuned to iron and can form a relationship with iron would be the legionnaires. So what does that relationship look like? It allows you to strengthen your sword, to resist someone trying to dent your shield. You can physically talk to your shield because of the relationship that you have with it and tell it, hey, strengthen yourself, resist what they're trying to do to you. So much so that when we clash blades together, iron on iron, I can talk through my sword and tell your sword to shatter, and it will then disintegrate into 1,000 pieces. This is the type of strength that you can have in this magic system when you form a relationship with a particular material. If you think about that, it's a simple magic system, but it's really cool. Like, think of what you could do if you were attuned to fire, to wind, to water, to snow. What if you were attuned to something more esoteric, to music, for example? Think of the way that you could control people, perhaps, control their emotions through what you were able to do through music. What if you were attuned to truth itself? There's a whole bunch of really, really cool things, little thought bubbles, little pathways that you can go when thinking about what's possible in this magic system. And on the surface, it's simple and you can visualize it. But then they introduce this idea like real early on about congruencies. What do two elements have in common? And how can they then relate to each other? Once you peel back the curtain and start thinking about congruencies, the magic system is kind of infinite. It is endless. You can take this in all manner of ways. And I'm actually super keen to see where that goes in book 2 and book 3. Where my mind goes with congruencies is like, just because I'm ironbound, what properties does iron have that are similar to gold, for example? Okay, well, they're both metals. Does that mean I can then, if I can form a strong enough relationship through my iron, actually change what happens with gold? What else does iron have? It's really strong. Okay, what else out there is really strong? Rock. Can I now manipulate rock? I don't know if this is where the author wants to go, Andrew Givler wants to go, but that's kind of where my mind goes when I think about congruencies. Help me out in the comments if you've read it. Is that the impression that you got, or am I barking up the wrong tree? Either way, I liked the idea of how one material could relate to another and what the combining of those could achieve. I liked that. So this is a magic system that I could really get behind. And this is where it becomes a real progression fantasy. The magic system, you have really defined tiers within your magic system. Everyone starts off as a copper. You then progress through exposure to silver. You then progress through a whole bunch of unnamed things to gold. And that's kind of cool. The little caveat I will add here is think about how devastating and how many military coups you're going to have if your legionnaires are just outright invincible and they can just touch anything and be like shatter, bend, break, all of that type of good jazz. And so they wear these resistance collars, essentially, which prevent the average legionnaire from being able to progress and ascend to silver. So most of the ironbound are actually coppers. Only a select few, the Fidelis, those that are worthy, that can be trusted, are allowed to ascend to silver. So that's a really cool little wrinkle, and how it's another way in which it's built into the entire world building, essentially, because it's that Roman inspired. So it's not exactly like Will of the Many. Will of the Many had a real clear 3-tiered structure where you had governance, religion, and military. You don't really have the same sort of religious aspects to this book, but you do have senators and governance and that aspect of it as well, and a bit of politicking and political intrigue built into that side of the world. But then you have a real clear military structure. So it's more 2-tiered in comparison to Will of the Many, which had real 3 clear, distinct tiers. So that's one little difference, but one similarity nonetheless. And so another little similarity, that the world building and the magic system and the way that they're intertwined, and in comparing Ironbound to Will of the Many. In Will of the Many, you have that real clear society structure. There's like a full-on pyramid, half your will going up, and it goes up and up and up, and you have the power law sort of structure. You have a very similar setup with those that don't have a core heart, those that are copper, those that are silver, and those that are gold, in terms of just raw numbers. Say you've got 50,000 people without a core heart. You've then got 10,000 coppers. You've then got 2,000 silvers, and you've got like 50 gold. They're not the exact numbers, but that's the type of ratios that you should, I guess, be thinking about. And that is built into society and into its structure. Having read Will of the Many, Strength of the Few, I was able to visualize what that type of hierarchy and relationship would look like. And so that was cool. I liked that. And it creates a level of prestige as our protagonist caster aura farms his way to silver and hopefully gold and beyond. So let's jump into that first person present tense concept. This is something that I didn't really appreciate how much I liked. Red Rising and Hunger Games are two really quite popular examples that are written in first person and present tense. I ran, I watched, all of that sort of thing. It's happening right now. And so the benefit that I find here, and it works in Ironbound as well, is it leans itself to a lot of momentum. It's action orientated. Things are happening right now to the protagonist and you're experiencing them as well. There's no hindsight bias. There's no rationalizing of a situation. And it also, that combination lends itself really well to an unreliable narrator. We see things through Castor's eyes. Yes, he wasn't plebeian by any stretch. He was a patrician, but he came from an agricultural region. And you can just imagine a city plebeian is probably on par with a patrician who lives out in the countryside, or at least that's the vibes I get from this world. And so Castor is very naive. He is obviously very sheltered from what is taking place with the Empress and her Praetorians and all of the rich families and the feuding that's probably, like we discover, is likely taking place between those families. It creates for an interesting narrator because he is outright oblivious to so much of that. And he has this level of innocence where he was like, oh no, our beloved Empress Diana, she would never think to do these sorts of things. And it's like, you fool, of course she would. She's power hungry. What do you mean? Have you ever interacted with a world leader? No, of course you haven't, because you're a farmer. And so he is quite innocent. And so we see him taking this glass half full approach to a whole bunch of encounters. And you're like, well, that's going to burn you in a second. And it burns him all the time. But we watch his innocence start to get eroded away. And I'll talk more about that in the spoiler section in particular. I'm probably completely butchering spoiler-free versus spoiler. And so I quite liked the way in which the first person present tense allowed for that combination. So let's talk about it being action-orientated, plot-focused, and progression fantasy. Do not read this book if you're looking for an expose into the issues with capitalism. Like that, you're not going to get that from here. Don't look at this if you're looking for a giant metaphor into the demise of the Western civilization. That's not what this book is about. So don't read that and think that's what you're going to get. This is pure entertainment. This is watching someone, it's aura farming, right? It's a revenge story. It's watching someone start at theoretically the lowest run and just progressing, working their way up with the one goal in mind. I want to slay some people. I want to rip some hearts out of some humans and to avenge everything that's been taken from me. That's what this story is. And so the progression fantasy comes into it with that magic system piece, the coppers, the silvers, the golds. He's like, I need to kill a dude. He is a gold. Therefore, I must become a gold to allow me to do that. And he is upskilling as he goes. This was kind of like the first progression fantasy that I have read. The parallel that I'll draw for people, and it's not perfect, but Dungeon Crawler Carl is super popular right now. That is far more gamified, where you've got text boxes coming up and stats and a whole bunch of things like that and side quests. That's not what Ironbound is, but think about it in the same way in terms of, okay, when I get to this level of skill in my relationship with iron, it'll allow me to do blah. So let me explore that. Okay, so iron at copper, I have to be touching the iron to be able to influence it, to be able to tell it to shatter, to bend, to break, all those good things. At silver, I can now send my iron feelers out into the world and I can sense iron moving in the room just over there. Just think about that and how lethal that makes someone, given that people trying to kill you are carrying around iron daggers and what that allows you to do. Someone who has a relationship with light, for example, and can make basically the world just go dark. Oh, I don't need my eyes. I can sense what you're doing. Neo style from Matrix. Gold, we don't get a lot of interaction with gold. It makes sense. We're in the first book out of 3. It doesn't make sense that our dude can get anywhere near gold in the first book. So this progression fantasy, he's always like, what can I do to level up? How do I get to this next level? What's involved in escalating my skills so I can go slay some golds, right? So that progression fantasy, it creates for an action-orientated story. And that's where it becomes really enjoyable. And it actually highlights one of the negatives of this book a little bit, is I felt like, and it's a product really of the unreliable narrator. Having this narrator come from a backwater kind of town and to be really quite innocent and naive, is that he didn't have the knowledge of exactly how it was these 6 Iron Lords overthrew the gods and exactly where Kor comes from. Yes, he's learned and he's educated, but he doesn't really seem to have a deep level of insight. He kind of has just bought on face value whatever his teachers have said, and that's the knowledge that he has. So he's not this inquisitive kind of mind naturally. He kind of gets there a little bit and he's looking for quirky ways to solve problems, but he doesn't seem to have an inquisitive mind in terms of asking questions and challenging the status quo on things, at least not before we pick up his story. And so the downside of that is I have more questions. I want to know more about these Iron Lords and how that was that they came to kill the gods. Like, how do you kill a god? Yes, you can find a way to storm Mount Olympus and actually then come face to face with a god, but they're a god. Does that not mean they're immortal? And so I had questions there and I wanted that to be explored. I wanted the Empress and her Praetorians and how the world works and these dudes getting around with, they're not Praetorians, they have another name, the select few that have these non-iron weapons. I wanted to know more about them. And so it lent itself to a campfire discussion. Whilst we're off learning how to be a soldier, it lent itself to an environment where someone could share a story, a myth basically, like a campfire story where we could learn because our protagonist is learning. And we got little snippets of it, but I wanted more of it. But I guess it's the story that Andrew wrote in that we had that unreliable narrator. And so we only know what he knows. I'm just trusting the process that I get to learn more of this in the future. There's also this weird golden wolf piece. I want to know more about that. It's like smack bang, crash on into the story and gone. Come back, please. Like, tell me more about. And so I'm trusting in book 2 and book 3 that we get to know a little bit more about this terrorist and how exactly who this character was. Because he's obviously real. This was not a dream manifestation. There are physical marks on the arm. I would like to know more about this, please. Author, please give that to me. So I have a lot of questions. I don't need to finish book 1 and have all my questions answered. There needs to be intrigue. There needs to be something to make me want to come back to book 2. And he did that. I guess I'm being greedy. Perhaps I'm being a little bit greedy there, but that's okay. And now on to the spoiler section here where I get to talk to the people that have already read the book. I'm keen to know that people have read it, whether or not you enjoyed this as well, whether all progression fantasy is like this or did I get lucky here? Like, I liked this book. Will I like other progression fantasy? If so, give me a recommendation in the comment section there. Okay, like our boy goes and does a deal with the devil, basically. This guy needs to stop talking to the gods. The gods are not dead. You should not be talking to the gods. It's super fascinating how basically you swear an oath, you can't get away with it. You swear to a god, the god will hold you accountable, even if they're a shell of themselves. Kind of fascinating. I love the fact that the dude's got full Edward scissor arms like the Gleaners from Strength of the Few, except it's the frost swords. How cool is that? I really like that. My misunderstanding about I think it's my misunderstanding about the magic system and congruencies and how that works. But I was under the impression that iron is cold, Arctic frost or ice, whatever the second thing that he imbues with, is super cold. Is he able to infuse these together? Like, is that where we're going with this? Like, yes, he's going to progress them potentially both to gold at some point in time. But is he... okay. I got to think about that a little bit more. It's probably not good to think on camera because I'm going to make a fool of myself. And let's talk about the warning that Dad gives right before he goes to run the labyrinth, essentially, where it's not worth it, dude. This will eat at your soul. You don't want a core heart. Trust me. And his dad was only a copper as well. Never progressed to silver because I think he understood, hey, this is eating at me and making me someone that I don't want to be. I think, like, if I think again about what is iron like, iron is cold. And he talks about the Arctic frost giving him the cold logic, and he's able to rationalize things in a real unemotional way. I think these things are really heavily influencing him as a person. He barely was sad at all about the fact that he never gets to see his best friend again, Valentina. I think iron is heavily, like right from the get-go, starts to heavily influence who he is as a person. The dude is not sad at all. He mentions her twice, I think, for the rest of the book and going, oh, I wonder how she's going. Anyway, on to my trajectory. His dad was sliced in half in front of him, and he's pretty sure his mum and sister and dog are dead now as well. Yeah, he was a bit bummed out by it, a bit sad, but he just like full on cased over his heart and got on with life. I think that was deliberate. I think that was a side effect of being bound to a particular material. You start to actually adopt the way of the life. I'm thinking about Bane in Batman. You merely adopted the way. I was born in the darkness. You start to be born of iron, where you get this iron heart where you can barely feel things. Right at the end, where Marcus dies as well, he's just in the zone. He is in a flow state, and he's kind of like, that sucks. Let me slaughter everyone else around me. And then kind of continues trudging on with Felix right at the end there. I think that was deliberate. I think that is exactly what that warning from Dad is exactly meant to mean. And I think that's what we get to explore. Iron and Ancient Frost are both this cold and really stubborn and matter-of-fact sort of materials. I am concerned what's going to happen to our boy going forward. Is he just going to become this ruthless, cold-hearted killer? Like, is that the way in which this is going to interact with him and change who he is a person? We'll see how we go. And I liked that other sort of comparison with Will of the Many and Red Rising, and that Castor as well. He is undercover essentially from day dot, in the fact that he has secrets and he is trying to keep that suppressed. And so he's watching what he says to each person, trying not to get caught out, but he's still hot-headed at times, wanting to avenge people's deaths and do all sorts of silly stuff. And he's having to watch what he says in each sort of conversation. Felix isn't dead, obviously. I learnt that through Pierce Brown's writing. If you don't see it, it didn't happen. No body on page, then it hasn't happened. So Felix is going to come back. And it was interesting to see Felix went from enemy to ally really quite quickly in the story. And I liked that at the beginning there. You extend an olive branch, you see what you're going to get back. And better to do it with a Primus as well, someone who's quite clearly smarter than you, or at least has better and clearer motivations. I think that was probably the case with Felix as well. But either way, went from enemy to ally really quickly. Did we watch him essentially go from ally to enemy at the end? Because these two dudes were button heads at the end. Felix was starting to really call him out on a few of his decisions, a few of his cold, iron-hearted decisions. Interesting how the iron heart didn't affect Felix nearly as much. Felix will come back in book 2 or book 3 as well, and we'll face off again later in time. I really liked Ironbound. This was progression fantasy. This was new to me, where so much of the focus was around watching the protagonist try and level up his skill set, interact with his magic system more, so he could get to a standard where he is at the gold standard, where he can now go hunt down revenge, kill, avenge people that were taken away from him. So I really quite liked this story. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was fast-paced. It was action-orientated, plot-driven storyline. It's not going to break the world in terms of the emotional pull necessarily, and it was kind of surface level at times in terms of our character development, I guess. And what I mean by that is when Marcus died, wasn't too bummed. It didn't pull me in the same way as when other side characters have died in the past. Perhaps why? I'm heavily invested, though, in Castor. I want to see him progress and level up. Not in the same way Carl does from a lit RPG sort of storyline from Dungeon Crawler Carl, but more organic to the story. I liked the way that the magic system was more built into the world building as well. I'm keen to see where this one goes. Can he keep his secrets secret? We'll see where we go. I would recommend this. This was fun. This was like 3.9. I'm going to give it a 4 bananas out of 5. Everyone should read this. It was good fun. Until next time. Ciao.